So the question got asked about question number 9 in homework 1. It's question 1.15. Notice it comes from the 3rd edition. In the 3rd edition, they talk about correlation earlier in the text than in the 4th edition. But the question overall is still good, and we can quickly describe what's happening in part C. So I'll do that right now. We're looking at this data, and we see that it's kind of spread out, and we've got to decide if there's some positive relationship, negative relationship, weak or strong relationship, or if there's none. But first we have to decide what all those terms mean. And so to do that, let's go ahead and go to chapter 8. So I'm going to go here to chapter 8. All right, notice there are some scatter plots. Here we are. So this, we would say, has a negative relationship because as our variable increases, this variable goes down, right? So here, this has got a downward slope or a negative slope, and our general trend is down, so we say that's a negative correlation. Here, this is a positive correlation because we have a line that is going up when we're imagining a line going through our points. This line is called the line of best fit, but we'll get more into that in chapter 8. So negative correlation, positive correlation. This one looks like slightly negative, but we would probably say that there is no real correlation because as we're moving from left to right, it's not necessarily clear that these points, this variable goes up or down. I'm not really sure. So here we've got a negative correlation, and it's relatively strong, and we say it's strong because our points are close to the line here, right? It's not too spread out. Here's a positive correlation, and it's weaker because our points are more spread out, right, when we're looking at the line. And here is a, we would say this is probably no correlation, just because our points are spread all over the place, and this line basically looks flat. So that would be, so here's negative and strong, positive and weak, and no correlation in those examples. Let's look at one more example here. This is a brush-tailed possum. Here we're talking about two variables. With the brush-tailed possum, we were talking about the total length of the possum. So I guess, what is that, from tail to nose, I suppose? And then the head length, that's just how long the head is. We want to see, is there a relationship between how long the opossum is and how long the head is? Well, we could have a possum that is 75 centimeters long and 85 millimeters of head length, right? But we notice that as our possum gets longer, our head length goes up, right? As if we were thinking of where that line is going to go, the line's going to go right kind of through here, right? Picturing a straight line. As our length of the possum increases, the head length also increases. So here we would say there is a positive relationship between those two, and that makes sense, right? The longer the possum is, the longer its head should be. But describing whether or not it's strong or weak when we don't have any numbers to go with it, which we don't at the moment, is kind of tricky. So I would say that I think it's relatively weak and positive just by looking at the graph. I'm picturing a line going here, and there's data spread all over the place. We can see that it's going up, but there are data points kind of like all over the graph. So if we go back to our problem, we've got the number of study hours per week and our GPA. As we study more, our GPA should increase, but that's not always necessarily the case. Right? We could study 5 hours and get a 4.0. We could study 20 hours and get a 4.0. We could study 40 hours and get a 4.0. Maybe that's 45 hours and get a 4.0. So it looks like if we're picturing that line that captures, kind of goes in between most of our data, kind of starts here and kind of goes this way. So it's going up, but it's not going up too quickly. And our data is kind of spread all over the place, but it's also got kind of a general upward trend to it, right? And you kind of see the upward trend in these bottom points. So I feel like we've got a positive relationship because that line's kind of going up, and we have a weak relationship between the two variables because our data is spread out. It's hard to capture. Later on in chapter 8, we'll get numbers to be able to quantify that relationship if it's strong or weak. But it's hard here because we have changed our scale. Our line would look closer to our dots. So my initial assumption is it's a positive relationship and it's relatively weak, but it might be positive and strong. Okay, if you have any more questions, feel free to post in the forum. Thanks.